Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, everybody. We'll call this meeting of the first Affordable Housing Ad Hoc Committee to order. Oh, I'm sorry. I act like I've never been up here before. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll call this first meeting of the Richland County Affordable Housing Ad Hoc Committee to order. Ms. Carilla, will you call the roll?
Terracio,
Yes, here.
Weaver,
Here.
Barron. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. And then I'll also recognize that we have Mr. Livingston with us here in person, and Miss English is on the phone or on the Zoom. That brings us to item 2, the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion regarding the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I should have asked if there's any changes or anything. Okay. No, thank you. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. We'll take the roll regarding the agenda.
Terracio,
Yes?
Weaver,
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Motion approved.
That brings us to item 3, the election of our chair. Is there a motion regarding the chair?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
is that what you are?
Currently, yes.
In another world, hey girl. No, just and so no, seriously. I'd like to make a motion to nominate Allison Terracio as chair.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. We're getting some feedback. Are we okay? Okay, good. We'll take the roll regarding the chair.
Terracio,
Yes?
Weaver,
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you, and thank you for your trust. That will bring us to item 4, items for discussion and action. 4A is the affordable housing definition. So just to kind of introduce this item, it's just really important that we know what we're talking about when we talk about affordable housing. There are in our packets some definitions of so for instance, on page 5, there is Appendix D, and the second item on that page is a definition of affordable housing. That is a fairly limited definition of affordable housing. I circulated a definition to the group that, if it's okay, I'd like to read out, and then maybe we can discuss that as an option. So just pulling it up, okay, and making it big enough for me. So the definition that was suggested and approved and given actually a lot of person hours for the City of Columbia is this one. And it just says that affordable housing is a continuum of equitable, inclusive, and quality rental and homeownership opportunities for people at every income level, which is critical to creating a safe, complete, and thriving, to creating safe, complete, and thriving communities. So I wonder what you all think of that one. If you have any other definitions you'd like to bring to the table. Yes, Ms. Barron.
Thank you. I personally like this definition, and my number one reason for liking it is because it does provide some continuity as it relates to the city and the county, and it will alleviate any type of confusion locally when people are talking about affordable housing. Now, it is somewhat similar, it's somewhat different from some of the definitions that are included in our packet, but I think it's close enough to really get us where we're trying to go. But more, I think the number one thing that I like most is that it's aligned with one of the municipalities that we have already doing the work.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments on that definition or suggestions?
Madam Chair, I'm fine with the definition too. I think Gretchen makes a good point. You know, it's the same as City of Columbia, keeps us on the same page. So I'm fine with it.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Livingston.
One thing that I find, I think, may be helpful in the future with this type of a definition is it doesn't kind of tie you down. Because you hear definitions saying 30% of an income and so forth. Well, who income? I mean, some folks 30% could be, whatever. So this definition gives us the flexibility to build some parameters around it, whatever you want to.
Right. I specifically wanted to avoid talking about particular income restrictions as it relates to that. We can refer to that 30% number as we are doing some of our calculations as a benchmark, but I don't think that needs to be limiting to what our definition is. Okay, thank you. I think we're all in agreement. Yes, Ms. Barron.
Does this need a motion?
I would love a motion.
So I'd like to make a motion to accept the definition as read earlier by the chair.
Second. All right, any further discussion? All right, we'll take the vote regarding this definition.
Terracio,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Barron.
Yes?
Motion approved.
Great. We did in a few minutes what it took many, many meetings to do.
We thank the
and,
city.
We thank the city for having done that work. Okay, so that will bring us to 4B, which is probably a little bit of a longer conversation. So this is the project scope. And so I kind of wanted to maybe allow some of our staff, if they're prepared to speak, if they would like to some of the ideas that have been talked about over the past couple of years in regards to affordable housing. And I don't want to necessarily put anybody on the spot if they're not ready, but Administrator Brown.
Yes, Madam Chair. And if you've had some conversations with members of the team also that are on the call, whether it's ACA Jensen or ACA Thomas, I certainly would let them speak to any specifics. I do know as we begin this conversation around the time that we put money aside related to affordable housing, there were some different conversations around what that might look like. That included things such as providing monetary assistance to agencies within our community who already do affordable housing work, whether that was a combination of someone like the Columbia Housing Authority or some other agency that does providing fix-up opportunities, converting old space or unused space to available space that could then be used. Those were some of the other conversations that were had. There were some entities who had approached members who talked about investing into some sort of fund that would potentially allow for some opportunities with that. And so those were some of the larger conversations. Since then, we've heard potentially acquiring older properties that may be not utilized. I've heard, for example, maybe old hotels, things of that nature, and converting them into affordable space. So those were some of the larger sort of projects that had just been generally discussed throughout a couple of conversations that we've had as you talked about what you might want to delve into. And certainly if there are any additional conversations that might have happened through just direct conversations with the team that they may recall, I'll allow them to go ahead and address you right now as well, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And just recognizing Chair Mackey and Vice Chair Pugh coming in. Thank you for joining this meeting. It feels very important now, as if it wasn't before. And I'll just open up to ACA Thomas or ACA Jensen. Again, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if you want to speak up now, thank you. ACA Thomas, I see you're off mute.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Another conversation that I've had with some members of council relates to down payment assistance within the districts as well, and how that may be able to be defined, or a down payment forgivable type loan that may be able to be paired. We've seen those in several municipalities to encourage home ownership, not just rentership, as well.
Thank you. And I will second that sentiment about helping to encourage home ownership to help folks build wealth and stability in the communities. And then I see ACA Jensen is off mute. Do you want to speak up here?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may be recognized.
Yes.
Thank you. I will live also. So just very simply, I think many of you know that affordable housing and housing in general is a personal passion. To be something that you know that I've gone all the way from my undergraduate degree to this point. And one of the key things to understanding the housing is effectively a commodity, and that supply and demand economics are very much at play in terms of housing. And during my time with the city of Reno, I came in right near the end of the economic recession, and housing was extremely affordable in that community during that time. And then it experienced for several years the nation's largest increase in housing costs. And it was effectively an issue of folks leaving the region during the recession. And so housing values and housing costs plummeted. And then when during the economic turnaround and folks returned back to the region for the major industrial and industries that were established there, the housing prices then soared again. And so that's one of the things that, as we're talking about this, is that we need to understand that what makes housing unaffordable is mostly demand. And that as we have strengthened our community substantially with all of our economic development, that is going to affect the affordability of housing. It'll probably be the single largest driver in the cost of housing here in the region.
Thank you, AC Jensen. And one thing I'll add to that is that I would like to look at naturally occurring affordable housing. There's an actual term that's naturally occurring affordable housing, and to see if our county can create some policy around preserving places that are already affordable and helping them to stay that way so that they're not subject to these radical shifts. I'll open the floor to other folks, committee members or non-committee members. Yes, Ms. Barron.
Thank you. So I think the last few moments we've spent talking about what we've been talking about. And so I really would like to see at some point, maybe today even, really just kind of, and I think how we got here with this committee is that we need a way to really just kind of put our heads together to determine what it is that we want and what it is that that we're looking to accomplish with the funds. And I know we traditionally do work sessions and things of that nature, but what does that work session look like? What expert do we bring in to help us process that? And there have been many who've approached me, and probably you all, as quote unquote experts, but I think that I would like for someone to come in who's an expert that is not biased to their work. So, it's kind of like me saying, hey, I'm an expert at after school, and talk to me, and I'm going to tell you all the reasons why you need to hire my company. I don't think that's helpful, but I do think that it would be helpful to find that entity, whether it's, through one of the local universities or such, that have, done some studying, and then not only just general studying, but looking at the specific climate of Richland County and the surrounding areas to determine what our needs are, because we all can say that we know there's a need. And as our community is growing with the economic development, it's going to continue to be a need, but what does that need look like? I think if we're going to help address this challenge, it's nothing worse than somebody giving you something that you don't need. So, and I would just like for us to really kind of really take the next step now in this conversation.
Thank you. And I think there are maybe some opportunities to get some numbers. I know that there are, when ACA Thomas and I spent some time, and Mr. Livingston, and I believe that Ms. Newton was also in a meeting, and we talked about kind of the numbers that we need to know for Richland County. So, for instance, how many housing units do we have? How many building permits are we issuing? How many of those are multifamily? We need to get down to some numbers, and maybe we can come up with a list of questions that we have for some specifics. Another specific number that I would like to know is, can we do, for instance, a hotspot around where is our naturally occurring affordable housing, and how can we help to preserve that? So I think there's a lot of prongs we can look at as it relates to how we're using the funding. I would like to explore some approaches as to, if you are, for instance, using some of this budget that we have, the $4 million that we set aside, what legally, if you're entering into agreement with us to receive some of those funds, then what is your end of the bargain? How long are you going to keep this unit or many units affordable into the future? So those are some of the things that I'm thinking of in terms of policy, because we know that this $4 million can go in the snap of a finger probably. And so I'd like to know how we can build a sustainable model for affordability. Yes, Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think you answered one of my questions. So we still have the $4 million from the ARPA funds?
Those were kind of reallocated to the general fund. I see Mr. Brown. Do you want to speak to that?
The answer is yes, that those funds are under the purview of county council as just say general fund dollars to be spent in the area of affordable housing.
Okay. So one of our committee's goals would be to determine, obviously, what we're doing with that $4 million if we come up with a plan.
That's correct.
Okay, and county council will have to sign off on that. Okay. And then the second point, I think we should maybe invite some other cities and counties maybe to weigh in on some things that they've tried. I've seen articles in the Post and Courier. I'm sorry I didn't bring them today, but I have them, about some things that Charleston's trying to do, because they're going through the same thing with affordable housing. They can't keep workers downtown because the cost of housing is so high. They're having to be bussed in from the surrounding areas, or these folks are driving in. So maybe we could look at what Charleston's doing in the area of affordable housing, and if they've got some good ideas, share them with us.
Yes, I agree that it's not just going to be one policy. Ms. Mackey?
Thank you, Ms. Terracio. I think I heard several things I wanted to, comment on. One of the things that I do think as a committee and body, we do need to look at first, what do we want to do with the $4 million allocation that we have set aside, and really begin to implement that sooner rather than later. But I do think it is almost a two-phase approach, in the sense that I do think there are some things that we can get started right now. And this affordable housing committee and conversation is an ongoing one that continues to evolve as our community evolves. So it's not we have to solve all the problems right now. It is here are the things that we need to focus on right now that we can get started with the $4 million. And then how do we want this to continue to evolve, and how do we plan for this in our budget long term as we continue to grow as a county? And so I do think there are things that we can do and implement right now. And to Mr. Weaver's point about other counties, for those of us who recently attended the Association of Counties County Connect Day, they had an entire panel on affordable housing, and each county spoke to many different things they're doing. But I do think there is being unique and meeting your county's needs, I think, is more important in this instance than necessarily hearing what they, I think once we identify what we want to focus on, then maybe we can look to see where other counties, their lessons learned. But I don't want to mimic another county because their needs aren't the same as ours. And I think we should maybe be looking at what are some of our immediate needs that we could address right now as we work to develop a long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Mr. Livingston.
I think everything I want to say has been said, but let me just reiterate a couple of things. And the first one is I think the urgency for us to at least try to move forward with trying to utilize the $4 million that we have now, instead of trying to spend 6 months to develop a plan and leaving that money sitting there when folks are in need. So I think we really need to figure out a means, I think, in dealing with that. And part of that may be to help with a long-range plan, but I think we need to figure that out early. And as mentioned earlier, too, I think it's real important for us to then start getting some really good baseline data in terms of Richland County. The only way we're going to achieve what Ms. Mack is talking about is understand what we really need, whether it's home ownership, whether it's rental rates, whether it's repairing homes, or whatever. We need to figure out all those categories in terms of our kind of need, and then once we get that data, just draw a plan around that particular data. But I don't want to spend the time doing that and not do anything with the current appropriation of the $4 million.
Thank you. Heard. Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Livingston brings up a good point on deadlines. I seem to recall there was some deadline on this $4 million that the feds were giving us to spend it by a certain date.
So one of the, I'm sorry, Mr. Terracio, would you like for me to respond?
You can, yes.
So one of the reasons why it was recommended and the council took the action to remove the limitation from itself by allowing funding to be put into the general fund and other funds to be used under the Affordable Care Act funds is so that you have the time to determine. So you're not under a deadline. Your only deadline is how fast county council wants to move in addressing it, however you want to address it. But the $4 million that is allocated is not under any deadline because it is not tied to directly anymore the funding that we receive as a result of
So whether it takes us 18 months or 3 years, it doesn't matter to spend it.
It only matters to you, and I know you're not going to take 18 months or 3 years, but
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr.
I'll say one
Livingston.
other thing, and just in general, my goal would be to try to prioritize trying to figure out a way to improve home ownership. I think that says a whole lot for wealth over time and so forth for individuals. And then I think it's important for us to look at trying to figure out a way to get folks engaged in affordable rental facilities. And then at some point, we may even need to deal with current folks who are losing their homes because of upkeep and repairs and things of that nature. So I'd kind of like to look at it at different levels like that.
Thank you. I hear the urgency of the members of the committee, and I feel that as well, particularly as it relates to expending these funds, and then continuing to look to the future for policies that we can implement going forward. So I want to ask, I suppose at this point, I don't know that we're ready to make a motion regarding $4 million, but I would like to see if maybe if it's an appropriate time, if staff has is prepared to maybe bring something to us. Like, are we at the point where staff has enough direction? No. So, okay, yes, Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. So we need to be able to clearly state to staff what it is that we would like to start out with. And we need to be able to provide them a framework of what the key area is. So if we are all in agreement that focusing on home ownership is key, then we need to decide if home ownership is one of those things. Are we saying this initial $4 million, that 50% of it will do home ownership, and we would like to focus on the home ownership for teachers or firefighters, like if we want to give categories behind it. Those are the type of things that we need to be able to say to them more specifically, so then they can come back to us and say, okay, based on those things, I think ACA Thomas mentioned some type of down payment assistance. She could bring us options that relate to that home ownership focused on teachers, firefighter, police officers, and a down payment assistance program. And she can bring us that and we can look at it and say, okay, yes, we like it. If the other thing is, okay, we want to invest in home ownership, but we want to focus on developers or builders and providing them incentives to increase the availability of home affordable housing in the market, then we need to tell them that as well, so then they can figure out, well, how do we go about developing language and updating the current language for developer and business developers or builders to take advantage of that said incentive. So we need to be more specific. I think Mr. Livingston laid out 3 categories. I think if folks are in agreements with those or some of those, that would be a good place to start honing in, and then from there, narrowing it down a little more.
Mr. Livingston, could you repeat those 3?
Home ownership, rental units, and upkeep and repairs of current units.
Thank you. And hopefully, as you're relating to upkeep and that sort of thing for already affordable units, that we could keep within our sites, maintaining the affordability of those existing units. Ms. Barron.
Thank you. So I was just kind of jotting down my notes, just some things that I'd like for us to see. This group is quite, it is aligned with what Mr. Livingston just stated, minus the 3rd item. I think that the 3rd item, when we get to looking at upkeep and those programs, it kind of falls in line with some of the other grant programs that we have in place. So I would like for us to really horn in on home ownership, specific to, I don't necessarily, I'm not a fan of one group of individuals over the other, but I think that's where we could look at the income to make the qualifications there, and then definitely looking at the affordable rental projects, because I know in my district, outside of my district, there are homes that are being purchased and these big companies are coming in, and now whereas you have a home that is 1,100 square feet, now they're charging $3,000 a month in a community that definitely does not have those funds to be able to live there. So now they're being forced out of the community that they once knew. So I would fully support the improvement of the home ownership, looking at income as being the driving force, and then affordable rental properties.
Thank you. Did you have any? You don't have to have these numbers now. I'm just asking if you do. Did you have thoughts about, what those numbers look like in terms of, percentage of AMI or something like that, or is that something you want staff to bring us?
I would definitely. They've given us a lot of information already, and I do think that we can use that information that they've already presented to us to determine that. And I think there was a document there that did state, what the best practice is when it comes to income. And so if it is the will of this body to move forward with this, I would like to just put that back to staff to give us what the best practice is for that amount. And when I say the best practice, I don't want us to be compared to a California or an LA, but a best practice for a place that is similar to Richland County, similar to Columbia and the surrounding municipalities.
Thank you. And Mr. Weaver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing about helping with affordability on buying a house, we could do something akin to what state housing does. If they give you $5,000 or $10,000 for down payment assistance, it creates a lien on the property. And when you go to sell that property, you pay state housing back. So that's a way to keep our funds ongoing So if we give someone $5,000, let's say they meet the criteria to get into a house, they go to sell it 5 years, 10 years, they should have $20,000 in equity at that point. If they've been keeping it up, we get our $5,000 back. That creates an opportunity for someone else. You know, I think we need to look at that too. To have a few strings attached to the down payment assistance, and that would create, you know, an ongoing pool of funds in the future.
Yes, Ms. Barron.
I just wanted to comment on what Mr. Weaver was saying. I like the idea, but I think we have to determine if that's the business that we want to get into. Because, you know, that particular organization, that's all they do. And if, you know, it could be that we decide that we want to create an office or create, you know, partnership with someone that could help us along the way with that. But I think that is a great thought, but before we put that thought out there, we have to determine if that is a long-range plan to continue to be in, and I'm using this loosely, to be in the business of affordable housing.
And we do have, I'll just recognize myself, we do have the Midlands Housing Trust Fund, and if we wanted to earmark a certain amount of money to be offered towards down payment assistance through that organization, and I think that's where kind of staff was going with looking at people who are already doing this kind of work, and do we want to allocate a certain amount of the $4 million to that kind of assistance? So that could be an option as well if we want to go the route of down payment assistance. Yes, Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. I guess when we continue to talk about just the down payment assistance, you know, we all know the price of homes has gone up, and ultimately with down payment assistance, I would assume that you're talking about 20%. And so, I mean, if you do the math, that goes pretty fast. And so that's another reason why I was initially suggesting a smaller group of people, even though I know it may feel like we're leaving folks out, but I want to acknowledge that we're only going to be able to help but so many this first go round with the allotted money that we have. And so when I talked about teachers or police officers or firefighters or county employees, those are folks, you know, I hear from District 1 and District 2 now that based on, we know what starting teacher salaries are, they can't afford to live in the district of the students that they teach. And I think that's huge as far as connection in classrooms in our communities as we continue to grow. Same thing with our police officers and firefighters. Police officers are getting discounts to live in apartments because, you know, they're a police officer, but if they want to purchase a home, they don't get those same discounts. And so that's kind of why I was thinking of the narrowed approach, just because, I mean, it's down payment assistance is a lot. It's not, $5,000 is not getting you anything for a down payment right now. And so I do think we may have to be more narrowed to really see a true impact early on. And those type of jobs and positions, you know, there's some commitment you could seek from teachers. If they get this, you know, you have to commit to staying with the district and keeping a contract for this amount of time, or you have to pay it back or something like that. But I do, just knowing how much it is, I do think we should think about what that looks like. But I like the idea of partnering with somebody, because I think we don't need to take on additional work for our staff, but I do think we could set clear parameters so that we can make sure, you know, the benefit is seen in Richland County.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. I have Mr. Livingston next.
One important thing I don't want to get lost either is if we're going to make a difference, whatever we do is going to have to be sustainable. We can't spend $4 million and then not have $4 million for the next year and so forth too. So I think that's really important. And so I think part of what Mr. Weaver's point too is, you know, any kind of way we can create some kind of revolving fund that helps with sustainability. That means that we can continue, you know, if you know, have to get, you know, a down payment or whatever, and all of a sudden they paid it off or done something different, we can roll those funds over when they can afford to, when they sell a home or whatever. That I think that's really important. Also too is most opportunities I look at with affordable housing is you have a lot of agencies that can do a great job of leveraging funds. In other words, you give them $1 million, and they're gonna get grants and so forth and guarantee they're gonna make it 5 million. We gotta really work with those kind of groups that can really help us leverage funds to make a difference, help us to be sustainable.
Thank you. I also wanted to say, just to respond to Ms. Mackey a little bit, I don't know this is true, but I might be the only person up here who's actually been through the process of getting into and living in an affordable housing unit. And so I'll say that one of the ways we experienced that was we actually entered into a lottery. And so if we are deciding to do this kind of really limited program, that we have some kind of way for the public to access it and to vet and choose people in some kind of application process. The lottery sounds weird here in Richland County, but you know, if we do have something like that, like what are your qualifications? And I'll tell you that for our experience, we lived within these boundaries of these streets. It was a certain amount of income, it was a certain amount of this, it was a certain amount of that. Other people, you know, it was geared more towards artists. So that kind of thing, we can come up with what our program looks like, but that is a thing that we could do. Just looking at time, it's 2:36, which is we're doing okay. Any other discussion or anything else from staff? Do we feel like do we need a motion to move forward? Do we need some kind of statement of scope from the body? Do we want to try to, I see a staff member wanting to speak up.
Is that okay? I'll step down and I'll keep it brief.
Thank you.
So, good afternoon.
Hi.
I'm Allison Richardson. I'm the division manager for community development. And so some of the grant programs that y'all are mentioning are some of the things that we work on. And I know some of us were working on just kind of the starter, what it looks like to do affordable housing acquisition rehab with our CDBG funds in this last substantial amendment process. So we're really excited to hear that this is happening. I think that there could be a lot of overlap and some just working together between what we already have in place and what you all want to do. I will say the fact that your funds are general fund and not tied to HUD regulations gives you a lot more flexibility than we have. But I do think we have some tools in our toolkit and we can inform some of the things because we've developed some expertise in this space. So a lot of the things you're talking about, we're doing it on a small scale, but we do have, I would say, a signature program of community development is minor home repair. So we have a very robust, it's called Operation One Touch, and we increased our amount to $24,000 per house this year because of the cost of rising repair cost. We do have a minor home down payment assistance program that we are opening up again, and it's been on hold for a while because of just the pandemic and staff turnover and folks really not being in a place to even leverage what's $10,000 going to do when your interest rate is, 7%. So now that hopefully things are going to cool down and maybe interest rates will go down, we'll see more activity on that. But so just wanting to let you guys know, so we have some set up for that already. Not that we're looking to add a lot more work. I love the idea of partnering and getting folks engaged, but just wanting you to know that exists. And the timing of this is perfect because we're in the middle of planning the annual action plan for our 2024 funds that come online October 1st. We have one more week of the public comment period. We've received more public comments in this period than we have in a long time, but it's not a lot. It's like 10. So I would welcome any public comment from the council, from your constituents. If this informs the CDBG grant as well as the Home Investment Partnership grant. Collectively, this is sustainable funds that you're talking about. So $4 million, a one-time, what's our plan? But this could be ongoing resources that the county that we do use already, but we would welcome your guidance and sort of your insight there. But, potentially it's $2 million a year that we're getting from HUD that can be geared towards affordable housing. So now is the time for the next week, if you could send some public comment our way to inform that action plan. And as we're working through proposals that are coming in, we'll be bringing them to you and looking to your kind of leadership on where we want to invest these funds. There's a lot of need out there, and so it's really difficult to decide where it should go. But I didn't want to have this wrap up without at least putting on record that you've got a staff, a really strong team of people who are eager to be part of the solutions on this front. So don't be afraid to reach out to us too.
Thank you. And just for the good of anybody maybe listening at home who might want to comment, should they go to the county website to find? Okay.
Yes. So we, it's all over our social media. You can go to the community development page on the county website. The very first thing right there on top, it says public comment period. So we are looking, it can be short. It doesn't have to be a long thing, but just, we're seeing a lot about affordable housing. We're seeing a lot of comments about seniors needing assistance. So now would be a really good time to get us the insight on that as well. Thank you.
Mr. Weaver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just penciling out some numbers here. I think it would be wise for the committee to figure out what percent eventually to tell staff, kind of what we're thinking. I'm just penciling out if we did 20% for repairs, that's 800,000. Don't think we could really spend that anytime soon. 40% to rental affordability, 1.6 million. That would take some time to spend that. And another 40% to home ownership. That's another 1.6 million. Eventually that money would flow back in once these people sold the home. So I'm just throwing that out there. We can change the percentages, but I think the committee should establish what those percentages are. We tell staff, and then we can kind of gear up the programs behind that.
Other thoughts from the committee or other council members? Yes, Ms. Mackey?
I would just say, I think based on the conversation we've been having, it seems like repairs is already fully covered in another division through grants. And so I would say we would keep repairs over there and not include it in this and work on something else.
I have a question about that because I don't want to miss an opportunity that we might have to ensure the continued affordability. And if we invest in repairs and can tie that to continued affordability, I wouldn't want to miss out on that opportunity.
Is your statement meaning if a developer wanted to rehab a place and then sell? So not a current homeowner doing rehab. We're talking about a developer going in, rehabbing a place that's already standing but just needs some work and then putting it on and guaranteeing to make it affordable. I'm okay with that. I thought you were saying a current homeowner paying for their repairs.
Right, or perhaps a rental, someone who owns a rental property, they need to do some repairs. They make use of some of this $800,000 and they commit to keeping it affordable, because what I don't want is somebody coming in, painting your front door red and then doubling your rent because they've made an improvement on your apartment.
Thank you for the clarification.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mr. Livingston.
Based on everything I've seen and read and folks I've spoken with, it's very clear that the greatest need when it comes to this whole issue of homelessness is just simply more units for folks to live in. I mean that's the bottom line, and of course that's the most costly thing. That's why I'm saying we just got to figure out a way to leverage funds to really figure out. Every unit we can do it, but if we can't come up with new units for folks to rent out, new ownership.
Thank you. And Mr. Livingston, I'll just also say one of the things that we have not mentioned in this hour together is we have not mentioned anything about making use of our economic development staff to help ensure that some of the folks who are coming to us who want to build, who want tax breaks, are supplying some affordable housing along with what they're building. Ms. Barron, did you have a comment?
Oh, I was going to attempt to make a motion.
I think we're ready.
So I move to direct staff to explore the opportunities for home ownership / down payment programs and affordable rental programs. Is that too vague?
No, I believe it's direct the administrator.
Administrator.
Not staff.
We know it's not you, sir.
Not staff either.
I have to get it every chance I get.
I knew you were talking to me. Just
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So the clerk got my, my revision.
Ms. Barron, did you only want to address homeownership and rental in your motion?
Right.
Okay.
Question, Madam Chair. So, if I understand the motion, rental affordability and home ownership, we're just leaving repairs off at this point, which I'm fine with. I just want to clarify that.
Correct.
Okay.
My motion is to explore these opportunities so that we can have more information to determine if that is the path that we'd like to go.
Okay, well, then I'll second that motion.
Thank you. And another question for the maker of the motion, would that, so because I noticed that you're not tying any dollar amount to that, you're not directing a certain percentage of anything? Okay.
No, I'm not at this point. I'm just asking for information so that, they could bring information back to us and then we determine that's not the direction we like to go in based on the information that they bring to us. So I think it's premature for us to talk money and assign, but just to get a clear path for where we're going.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay. Thank you. We'll take the vote.
Terracio,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
motion approved.
Thank you. Okay. So that will bring us to 4C, our affordable housing budget. I think we've mentioned this quite a bit. I'm not sure. We've all mentioned $4 million several times. Is there something else you'd like to add to that, Mr. Brown?
Well, I would just, not so much adding, but I did hear as a part of this conversation that members of the committee talked about a sustainable source. So it sounds like to me that, as we go into the budget process, you're going to be making some potential budget decisions concerning, affordable housing as it relates to funding beyond the $4 million. So just as you think about that and look at, all the priorities that you have aligned, that's something that I'm hearing you all talk about from a funding standpoint. So not sure. I know I heard Mr. Livingston mention, you started with $4 million. I'm not sure that means you're going to be allocating another $4 million or some other amount, but just, as you're weighing all the decisions you're looking at this year, it sounds like that's something you're going to be interested in continuing. So I'll be taking note of that and working with my team with that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver mentioned, that that other areas we're looking at using things like particularly a tax as it related to short-term rentals in certain areas to help fund some of this. There are other, the other avenues that we can look toward in terms of a revenue stream to help fund future projects.
Yes. So just keeping in theme, do we need to make a motion to get this information so that we can have that as a part of our discussion in our next meeting?
Yeah, Mr. Brown, would you like a motion for direction?
Related to potential future funding for
Yes.
affordable housing opportunities?
Yes.
I guess it wouldn't hurt. We can
Okay.
take a look. We can take a look, see what other options you may have related to revenues for housing. That certainly could be a conversation that we could come back to you with.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second. Further discussion? Okay, we'll take the vote.
Terracio,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Motion approved.
Brings us to item 5,
Move
adjournment.
to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Thank you.
Terracio,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thanks, everybody.